We're up to the Mishnah now on Daf Yud Gimel, Amud Aleph, on the bottom of the Amud. Sheish Arayos Hamuros Me'elu. So in other words, the first Mishnah enumerated 15 Arayos, and now the second Mishnah wants to isolate or focus our attention on 6 out of the 15, and they have a certain chumrah, which we're going to analyze. Now, one thing that baffles my mind as we go through this is that it seems that the chumrah that we're going to find in these 6 could theoretically apply even to other arayos beyond the 6. Okay, so that's something that I'm just mentioning it to get it off my chest as we start this sugya. It's not absolutely clear to me that the chumrah that we're going to learn about now, which has to do with the tzara of these arayos, would be limited only exclusively to these 6. Okay. So now we want to know what is unique about these 6. So let's first introduce the following principle with regard to the 15 arayos. In those cases, the Isur of Erva relates to the Yavam, per se. So, for example, let's say let's say 2 brothers married 2 sisters. So the wife of Reuven who falls to Yibum to Shimon, that's an Isur Vachos Ishto that's unique to Shimon, to the Yavam. Again, Harayos Asurus Rak Ala Yavam. So we're focusing on the Erva relationship in those 15 cases to the Yavam. However, that erva is not an erva vis-a-vis the brother that died. Right? He was allowed to marry this woman. He died, and she falls for Yibum to his brother, and she's now an erva to his brother. She did not have the status of an erva vis-a-vis the brother that died. And in those, let me use the word classic, in those classic cases of arayos, then the tzara is p'tura min ha'yibum u'min ha'chalitza, which means that if Reuven was not only married to the daughter of Shimon, but he was also married to another woman, that other woman doesn't fall for yibum at all to Shimon, because she's a tzara of an erev. In the next cases, the 6 cases that we're going to focus our attention on, there's an isur that's common to both the live brother, we'll call him the yavam, and the deceased brother. The erva is not exclusive to the brother who's the yavam, as it is in all the other cases. Mipnei she nisuos lacherim. He says, "Einom yecholos lios nisuos leechav el lacherim bilvad." So that this woman, in the case of the 6 arayos kamuros, cannot be married neither to the brother that died nor to the yavam. She is asura to both of them. And therefore, she could only be married to someone else who will call him a zar, a nachri. He's not part of this family. And therefore, if, let's say, this zar is married to an erva, who's an erva to all the brothers of a certain father, right, of a certain family, and he's married to another woman at the same time, then that woman, although technically you could call her a tzara of an erva, again, we'll flesh it out with a diagram in a second, but nevertheless, she is allowed to marry any of the brothers. In other words, in the 6 arayos chamuros, a tzaras erva is muteres. Let's backtrack again. In the 15 arayos, a tzaras erva, since she doesn't fall for yibum, is a eshes achiv. She goes back to the original erva state. And none of the brothers can marry this tzara. In the cases that we're going to deal with in the 6 arayos, the brothers, any one of them, could marry this tzara. Why? Because the tzara is outside the framework of yibum. She's married to an ish nachri. And therefore, tzara sayim mutaros. And the basic principle is that ein erva oseres tzara ela b'makom yibum. The din that a tzara of an erva becomes an erva, that only applies b'makom yibum when there's no yibum, like in the case where this erva is married to a zar, to a nachri. In that case, the tzara does not become an erva, and she's mutaros. You know, there's a certain paradox here in the language of the Mishnah. On the one hand, the Mishnah is saying that these 6 are chamuros, but on the other hand, the poel yotze here is really a kula, because the bottom line and the repercussion of this new category of 6 arayos is that the tzara is allowed to get married to any of the brothers. And yet we call them arayos chamuros. We really we'll have to come back again to this point, why the Mishnah classifies these arayos as chamuros. And v'elu, and this is going to be the list of the 6 arayos chamuros. Now, in each one of these cases, he has a diagram here in the Masechet on the next page. I think the plan should be that we'll go through 1 or 2 of these diagrams. I don't think we have to go through all of them, because I think the main point is to get the mechanics of it. And, you know, the mechanics is always the same, just that it changes in the specific details and variables. But the principle is one and the same. So I think if we go through maybe 1, 2, maximum 3 diagrams, I think we'll get the principle down. And that could be sufficient. So we'll start with Imo, which is the first of this whole series of diagrams. So I know, John, you have a Masifta, so we're now on Yud Gimel number Dalet. Yud Gimel and Aleph with a Dalet in brackets, and we're on the top right, which is labeled here as Kuf Chaf Gimel. So he has the following. This is for Imo. So he has Yaakov gets married to Sarah, and together they have a child by the name of Reuven. Yaakov marries Rivka, and together they have a child by the name of Shimon. So notice that Shimon and Reuven are both brothers through the same father, but they each have a different mother. Now Yaakov dies, and keep in mind that Sarah is the mother of Reuven. She cannot marry, certainly not Reuven, because that's her son, but she can't even marry Shimon. Why can't she marry Shimon? Because because Sarah is the wife of Shimon's father. Ashes of. So this woman, Sarah, cannot marry neither Reuven nor Shimon. So this is a case of Imo with that extra chumrah that we mentioned before, that she is equally prohibited to all the brothers, as opposed to the 15 arayos, where there's only an Isser Erva vis-a-vis the Yavam. Here, she's equally prohibited to both Reuven and Shimon, the two brothers, the two sons of Yaakov. Now what happened? Yaakov had died. Sarah cannot marry neither Reuven nor Shimon. And Avram comes along and he marries Sarah. Avram is what you call a Nocher, meaning he's outside the family. He's a Zar. He is now married to Sarah. Sarah is an erva to both Shimon and Reuven. To Reuven, she's an aim, and to Shimon, she's Ashes Aviv. Avram now, after marrying Sarah, marries another wife by the name of Rachel, and then Avram dies. Now, obviously, Sarah cannot get married neither to Reuven or Shimon, that we know. What about Rachel? Can Shimon or Reuven marry Rachel? And you might have thought that no, because Rachel is a tzara of an erva, because she, together with Sarah, were married, coexisting marriage with Avram. But the answer is no, because the status of a tzara's erva as an erva is only b'makom yibum. Here, there's no yibum. I mean, Reuven and Shimon are not in any way married, related to Avram, although Avram married Reuven's mother, but there's no yibum relationship here. I mean, these are not children of Avram. So when Avram dies, there's no yibum to Shimon and Reuven. So let's assume, for argument's sake, that Avram has no children from his marriage to Rachel. So Rachel doesn't fall for yibum. She's an almana. And either Reuven or Shimon could marry Rachel, because Rachel is a tzaras erva shalom b'makom yibum, which is not a tzara. So again, the basic principle is that the Torah imposed a status of an erva on a tzara b'makom yibum, which means that since the tzara is precluded from yibum, insofar she's a tzaras erva, therefore she becomes an eishes ah. But in the case of a tzaras erva where there is no yibum and there's no eishes ah, she's muteres. Again, if we come back to the word chamuros, the word chamuros is a little bit tricky, because what it really means is that there's an erva here on all the brothers. In contrast to our Mishnah at the beginning of the Masechta, where the erva relationship is between, let's say, well, whatever her name is, and Shimon, but not Reuven. So Reuven was married to this woman, Reuven dies, this woman falls for Yibum to Shimon, and this woman is an erva to Shimon. So the word chamura here means that she's asura to all the brothers. But I don't think that's the main point. I mean, the thrust of this Mishnah is to point out that there's no status of tzaras erva unless there's a nefila for Yibum. So you have two women, one of whom is an erva to Shimon, falling to Yibum after the death of him, and the other woman falling to Yibum to Shimon, and that other woman is now Eishes Ah, there's no Yibum. But if we're not dealing with a Yibum situation, we're talking about Avram marrying Sarah and Erva and being married to Rachel. When Avram dies, then any of the brothers who could not marry Sarah, nevertheless they could marry Rachel. Let's try another one. Again, just to get it's like a training session. You get used to it. So the second one is Eishes Aviv, which he calls Kuf Chaf Dal. So what happens here? Yaakov marries Rivka. I'm not sure why I've asked this question many times when they change the names and it gets you a little bit confused. But anyway, so So Yaakov marries Rivka, and they have a child by the name of Reuven. They have other children as well. Now Yaakov marries Sarah. So Yaakov is married to both Rivka and Sarah. From Rivka, he has Reuven and other sons. Yaakov dies, and Avram marries Sarah. Sarah cannot marry any of the sons of Yaakov. She certainly can't marry Reuven. 1 second. No. Get that right. 1 second. Yaakov married Rivka. Rivka is Ashes and all the other Banim. Let's see why does he mention Reuven at all here? It's like Masechet Yaakov, V'nisei Sarah Avram, L'Avram od Isha Rachel, and then Avram dies. Rachel, Sarah, she Ashes Aviv Shel Reuven. Again, I'm not sure why we mentioned Reuven. Muteres LeReuven Uli Echav, Mishum Shu Tsaras Erev Shalom B'Makom Mitzvah. Honestly, I don't understand why. I think he just mentions Reuven to give one name, one example. You know, there's no difference in, yeah. But it's basically the Erev of Ashes Av. So that was the second category. Let's try a hand at another one. Achos Aviv. So that he calls Kuf Chaf He. So Yaakov, in this case, Yaakov and Sarah are brother and sister. Okay. Yaakov has a son, we'll call him Reuven, and other sons. Again, probably the same theory that just he mentions Reuven, but he means any of the sons. Now Sarah marries Avram. And again, Sarah could not marry any of the sons of Yaakov because that's Achos Omeyav. Why? Because Sarah and Yaakov are brother and sister. So any of the children of Yaakov would be marrying their aunt. I had the Australians called the auntie. I only know that from the Yemic learning set. Anyway, so they can't marry their aunt because that's called Achos Aviv. Now, Yaakov dies, correct? Did I get that right? No. Yaakov doesn't die. Avram marries Sarah, and Avram dies.
Yaakov. Oh, yeah.
And Avram is married to another woman named Rivka, and therefore any of the children of Yaakov could marry Rivka. So that's called Achoso Me'av. What else does he have on the list? He's got, that was Achos Aviv. Now he has Achoso Me'aviv. And then he has Ashes Achi Aviv and Ashes Achi Me'av. So maybe, you know what? Let's just try Kuf Chaf Ches as, as a finale. So we did 3 out of 6. Now we're doing the 6th. So we'll have 4 out of 6. We'll see if we need the others as we go along. So we're talking about Ashes Achiv Me'aviv, which is Kuf Chaf Ches. Ashes Achiv Me'aviv. Okay, so Yaakov has many sons, one of whom is Reuven. Now, Yaakov has a son from a different wife, and his name is Shimon. Okay. Now what happens? Nasa Shimon es Sarah. So Shimon was a half brother to Reuven, etc. Marries Sarah, and they have a son. Okay, Shimon dies, and Sarah is Asura al Kol Achim, Sharei Eshes Ach, Yeshlo Banim, Asura Afili Achar Misa. Talking about Eshes Ach. So Sarah is an Eshes Ach, and that Isa applies to all the Achim, which means Reuven, etc. That's Ashes up. Now Avram marries Sarah and has another wife by the name of Rivka, and Sarah dies, and the other brothers could marry Rivka because it's Shalom b'Malkum Yibum, and Rivka is not at Sarah's ever. But one second, why do we need the fact that Yaakov had two wives? Why is that significant here? Yaakov had a son, Reuven, and he had another son from another wife. And that son's name is Shimon. So therefore, when Shimon marries Sarah, Sarah becomes Ishes Achiv. I guess he just wants to point out that this erva applies even in two brothers that don't share the same mother. They only share the same father. What would be if they shared the same mother and not the same father? Then would it change? Do we know this? Did we ever cover this? H's Achiv, if they only share the same mother?
Then there's no Yibum, and she's Isha's Ach.
Oh, but there is an Isra Shach.
Yeah.
So why is it important here?
Well, because it's
to emphasize that
if there were children, then there would have been Yibum. There were children, that's why there's no Yibum. So it's just that's implies
let me just digest what you said. In other words, we want to point out that no Yibum, even though Shimon and Sarah had it. So in other words, had Shimon and Sarah not had children, then Sarah would fall for Yibum. But we want to get a situation where there's no Yibum. So what are we going to do? We're going to say that Shimon and Sarah had a ben. So the whole thrust here is to say that there is no Yibum to be matter the Yisrael Shah. So therefore, we have to talk about the fact in a case. So if it would have been Ashes Achim Imo, I mean the same thing would apply, but we would not need a ben to exclude Yibum. All right, maybe you're right. Okay. But he summarizes this with the following. He says, Kol elu, Kishem shehein krovosa, v'echrei shem af krovos shel ochiv me'ov. U'mi'acher shein asuras ala ach v'kares, the ein kedushin totzim b'chai v'krisus, lo yitochen sheyiplu mimenu liyiblu. Shem name krovosov, v'hech shem af krovos shel ochiv me'aviv. So I guess he's saying that these are all arayos that would apply to all the other brothers. Now, why is he introducing the Ein Kiddushin Tovsim B'Chavik? V'yitochen sheyiplu mimenu liyiblu. Not sure what that's all about. When I learned this last night, I also didn't understand this. Why it's emphasizing lo yitochen sheyiplu mimenu liyiblu. You see, he wants to guarantee. Yitochen sheyiplu mimenu liyiblu. So again, in all these arayas, Sarah can't fall for Yibum because there's no ach whatsoever who's allowed to marry Sarah. That's what I would say is the principle here. I guess he wants to go a step further, and he wants to point out that even Be'itzer, there would be no possibility of Yibum, because even if, let's say, Reuben would marry Sarah or something like that, there would be no tfisas kedusha. Hence, there would not be any yibum. That's how I understand. Maybe this is oversimplifying, but so therefore, nisuli adam zar lo ish acheres umeis afal bisha heina suras ola bi iser erva. All these arayas arei umuta b'tzaros. Okay. Now the Mishnah goes back to the Reisha. First Mishnah Masechta Yibum. So what we're about to learn now is an addendum to the first Mishnah of Masechta Yevamot. Beit Shammai matirim tzaras liach Beisil Os. The entire enterprise of tzaras erva is actually a machlokas between Beit Shammai and Beisil. Beit Shammai never accepted the drush of Litzrar, and they never accepted the Isur Tzara L'Yibum. And therefore, Matirin es Tzaras L'Yibum. Beisil Osrim, they accepted the drasha of Litzar, and therefore, a Tzaras Erva does not fall for Yibum. And our Mishnah, at the beginning of Masechet Yevamot, will reflect the Shita of Beisil. Very interesting to me how the Rebbe Yehuda Nasi organized the Seder of Mishnah. It's like I would have thought that Beit Shammai would come way early. Now, why does he tell you to look into a diagram? Oof. Yes, just give me a second here. So you have Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Shimon marries Sarah and Rivka. And Sarah is an Arab. Okay, fine. That's what we know. No great shakes. And that leads us to Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, which is a hemshech of this mission. Okay. going to be really interesting to figure out if the offspring of Shammai could marry the offspring of Hillel. Also, let's say, according to Beit Shammai, if a tsaras erva falls for Yibum, she requires either Yibum or Chalitza. In this case, the brother gave Chalitza to the tsara. His Beit Shammai posted in a kuhuna. It means that Chalitza, like Gerushin, breaks up Ishus. In the case of Gerushin, it breaks up a full-fledged Ishus. And therefore, she can no longer marry a Kohen. She's a Grushin. In the case of Chalitza, it breaks up the Ishus of a Zika relationship. And she cannot marry a Kohen. She is now considered like a Grusha. She's a Chalutza. Now, again, let's keep in mind that this we'll have to discuss later. This status of Grusha in the case of a Chalutza is only midrabban. It's Beisil Makshirin. I mean, the Tzara never fell for evil. The Chalitza was meaningless. And therefore, it's just a, as I say, sort of a production on a stage. It's a play, it's a show, right? It's just a show. It has no halachic legal significance to go ahead and marry a Kohen. I mean, there may be a little bit of a chiddush here because the onlooker, the spectator, might mistakenly confuse this chalitza with regular, real, genuine chalitza. And how could she marry a Kohen? But we're not worried about that. Okay. Now, Nisyab. So the Tzara, as we said, according to Beit Shammai, falls for Yibum, and he was Miyabim. Beit Shammai Machshirin, if let's say he dies, so the Ruvain died and Shimon died. Ruvain was the original husband, Shimon was the Yavam, and Shimon now also died. So according to Beit Shammai, she's an almana. She can marry a Kohen. Beis Hillel posted. And we're talking about an erev of an Eishes Av. I don't know why he has to say posted, but the child of such a marriage would be a mamzer. Maybe the word psul here doesn't mean the kahuna. Let's see. He says, Beis poslim as hatzoras shislam lekahuna. Shitosame nasus al yom bisar erevas Eishes Av. Balkain who oser osan bibiyasu bilasu lekayim. The fisha isha shenivala bibias isur nase zona b'nesel lekayim. Kmosh kasuv isha zona v'chalolo yikaf. That's what Rashi says over here. It's still postage in the movie. Little lamed over here. You have a lamed. Oh, he tells you where to look up the post. So now watch what happens. According to Beis Hillel, according to Beit Shammai, this tsaras erva is misyabeves. And when the Yavam dies, she can marry Kohen. According to Beis Hillel, if Yibum took place, it's not Yibum at all, it's a bia of an Eishes Av. She's psul kahuna. So that same woman, according to Beis Hillel, according to Beit Shammai, could marry Kohen. According to Beis Hillel, she's not allowed to marry Kohen. Ubini Salah. Afal Pisha Elu Osme El Matirim Elu Pose Machshir Lo Nibnu Beit Shammai Milinose Noshim Elisa Noshe Beis Velo Beis Hillel Mi Beit Shammai. I'm trying to figure out, are we talking about psule kahuna or psule kol, meaning mamzeris. So he says here, Afal pisha elu osum es etzos liyibum, velu matir no son, elu postos etzos lekuna, im cholz, velu machshir no son, lo nimnu beit shami milisa, noshiv mi beisil, lo nimnu beisil milisa noshiv beit shami, v'afal gad, shel beis hillel, soras, ervas, surel yov bisreishis achshu b'kares, nolad mibia, sheyesh b'chiv kares. So finally, harei umam sev yosalov l'kol, lo chashu beis hillel al klal hanoshiv shemi beit shammai. How are you allowed to marry an offspring from the family of Beit Shammai? Shemen noldu mitzaros elushes yam. Ihoyu Beit Shammai modiim lahem. This I have to see again. So let's go through the Rashi. 5 lines down, 6 lines down from Afal pisha b'nei tzaros sh'nisayam b'Beit Shammai mzerim l'beisel harei b'isrei sh'sakay aleim v'isha b'kares u'b'nei arayis and b'lum mzerim k'n'lum filachilo nimnu beis hillel milisa noshe Beit Shammai. And here Rashi adds a whole shtickle Torah. This is not peace and harmony. This is not some sort of, Talmach, I love you kind of thing. But Lefisha Modiim Lahem Osan Abos Minatzoros Uparsh. Could you imagine over the course of millennia to keep records? I mean, that's why the Rabbanut today is flooded with all this work. I mean, we got Jews coming to Israel from, well, not during COVID, but in general, from all over the 4 corners of the world. And how do you know that this isn't a descendant of a Tsaras Erba who got married based on Beis Hillel? Beis Hillel would have to be Modia. Yeah, it's mind-boggling. What do you mean Modia? I don't understand. It's just logistically a night. Let's see if he comments on this. No. He has a different comment that there's going to be an issue as to whether Beis Shammai actually allowed it sort of to be Misiyaber, not caring at all about Beis Hillel. Kol ataros vatmeos shahayu elu mitarin. Okay, now we're going off on a different topic, but apparently an analogous, a parallel topic, in the sense that Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai are at loggerheads. And Beis Hillel mitarim and Beis Shammai mitamim. I think that reflects the general rule that Beit Shammai is always the machmer. So they were mitame. Lo nimnu osim taros elu al gabi elu. So let's say you have a kli, and this kli comes from the Beis Hillel. And Beis Hillel will retire something which according to Beit Shammai is tame. And now you're one of the Beit Shammai guys, and you want to be mitai, you want to put taros into that kli. Again, I guess we're going to learn Modian, I guess. I don't know. I don't see any comment in Rashi on this. Shohayu Beis Hillel, Mashilim Kalim LeBeit Shammai. So you came from the Beis Hillel camp, and now you're a member of Beit Shammai, you need to borrow his Kalim. You have to be retired. Lo chashashu Beit Shammai. Why? Shema Kalim Elu. L'chora, they should think that maybe these are Tmeim, even though Beis Hillel would say that. Kihayu, again, he says the same shtickle Torah. I don't have it in Rashi. Kihayu modiin osam Beis Hillel im ha'isa b'hem tumah. They would notify them that there was tumah in the Kalim. I mean, my gosh, this becomes enough. For Beis Shammai to notify about each Saras Erva that was married to the Yavam, And now they still have to notify Beit Shammai about every keli that it came in contact with tumah and it contracted tumah. Wow. So it could be that the underlying principle here, again, I don't know how the mechanics and logistics are going to work out, how, Tavel Bracha, I give you Yashikach if you can work this out, but the underlying principle of the Mishnah is that they worked with each other. Meaning, even though I reject your sheet entirely, but I recognize and respect the fact that you have this chumrah, and therefore I'm going to reckon with that chumrah, to notify you. So this would be interesting. Let's say, for example, Reuven shechts an animal, and Shimon wants to eat from this animal. Reuven knows that the shechita is a perfectly good shechita, but Shimon, for whatever reason, believes that the shechita was not, and the meat is neveil. Mm-hmm. So Reuven, I think, if I'm not mistaken, would have to notify Shimon that he's eating neveil. Don't eat this because you have a psak that according to your psak in Hilchos Shechita, this is neveil. I didn't accept that psak. But even though for me it's heter, I have to play the game on your court and notify you that for you, this is the vela based on your psak, where you ruled in Hilchos Shechita. I mean, the only problem that bothers me is that if that be the case, if my premise is correct, what is this Mishnah adding to the universal principle? Like the Torah says, L'fnei Iva lo sitei michshel. And for you, this is a michshel. For me, it's heter gomel, but for you, it's awesome. Here, I'll give you an example, a neder. I know that you took a neder, but I also know that you don't realize that the neder is chal on this particular object. I have no neder, and I'm not awesome. I have to notify you because otherwise you will violate the neder. So what I'm submitting to you is that this Mishnah is nothing more than a particular application of a universal rule. I don't see any chiddush. Again, you can talk about hupla and I love you, and therefore I respect you, blah, blah, blah. Maybe the extra chiddush is that here you're dealing with the Bari Plukta themselves. In other words, Beisil Beit Shammai are fighting this act. What is the status of Itzaras Erev? Does she fall for Yibum or she is an Erev of Eishazah? And they're battling. And maybe technically they still have the right to say, or I might think they have the right to say, go fly a kite. I'm not going to notify you the other way around. I mean, in the case of Beit Shammai said, I don't have to notify you that this woman is an Erev and the child is a mom. So, well, why do I have to notify you? And this was Heter Gomer. On the contrary, it's a mitzvah of Yibum. Allah, no. Shammai are obligated to notify Beis Hillel, even though they themselves are the material. It's one thing to say, there's a machlokas in Hilchos Shechita, I passed in Lakula, and I know that you passed in Lachum. Okay, I have to notify you. But if you and I are on two sides of a debate, and I'm telling you this is Heter Gomer, like Beit Shammai in the case of Itzaras Erev, I don't have to notify you. Well, you came up with a distorted svara. I don't have to play games with you. You've got to deal with this yourself. But maybe for the sake of peace, so that we could have marriage from one to the other, because otherwise they still can't marry anyone from Beit Shammai, because every time it might be a suffix, maybe it's a mas. So maybe in this case, if not for the global repercussion, I would have said that Beit Shammai they don't have to notify Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel don't have to notify Beit Shammai. If we disagree with you in Hilchos Tumah V'Tara, and this is Tahora, so this Kli is Torah, I don't have to notify you. But what would be the implications? So because of the implications of splitting Klal Yisrael, the two, relationship, I don't know. You have anything there in the notes?
No.
No, he doesn't have much here. Okay. Omer Rav Shimon ben Pazi, my time in the Beit Shammai. In other words, why doesn't he have this drush of Litzror? This is a problem because you remember that Rav Shimon, one of the Tanoim, he had a different interpretation of the word Litzror. So the Gemara could have just said that Beit Shammai, Rabbi Shimon, Shimshashanas, sorrow, Yel, Kol Kuchim, Yaf Ach. Rabbi Shimon has a drush of the word litzrar that excludes Zika for two sisters, since you don't know which sister could have the Zika. So we blow both of them out of the ballpark. The Gemara answers the Chsiv in the Parsha of Yibum in Ki Teitze. It says, "Osia eishes ameis achutza leish zar." Okay, that seems quite innocuous. So the word hachutza apparently is superfluous. So what are we going to darshan from the word hachutza? Yevama, achitzonis, liyavam. There's some Yevama who is sort of on the outskirts, on the periphery. You follow? Because what happens in the case of an Erevim? The Erevim means that she has a close relationship to this Yavam. So if we interpret the word hachutza as describing a woman who is not related to him, she's totally fremda, right? She's a nachris. That would have to refer to its sorrow. So in other words, the Torah itself here is addressing a case of hachutza, of its sorrow. Otherwise, why the word hachutza? And the Torah is saying that this woman who is Eishes HaMeis, but she's a hachutza Eishes HaMeis, not a krover, a hachutza, she's not allowed to marry an Ish Zar. It means that she falls for you. Wow, that's pretty brilliant. Chutza mechlal de ika, pnimis, meaning a krova. And Omer Achmana, nevertheless, the Torah says, Lo sia l'ishzar, meaning she falls for evil. So again, I don't know what the word litzar means according to Beit Shammai. That we have to come to grips with. But Beit Shammai seems to have a very valid derivation that there is yibum in the case of itzaras erev from the word chutzah. So the Gemara now turns the tables. The ball is in the court of Beis Hillel. What did Beis Hillel do with the extra word hachutza? Biboile lichirabi Rabbi Yehuda Amara, for the drasha of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Ra. Yom Rabbi Yehuda Amara, Minayin she'ein kiddushin tovsim biyavama. Let's say a woman falls for yibum, and she didn't get chalitza. So she's not allowed to marry anyone. Now someone comes along and marries her before chalitza. Is that marriage valid? Now, in general, let's say we reject Rabbi Akiva, we hold a chayve lav as kedushin tofsin. And this is an exception to the rule of chayve lav. Shenemar lo sia eshes hameis hachutza lishzar lo sia ba havaya lizar. Again, why do we need the word hachutza? Am I missing the punchline? And Beit Shammai built their whole case on the word achutza. So I guess the only thing you could say here is that achutza means outside of the circle of yibum, meaning there are X number of brothers. And hachutza means anyone who's outside of that circle. But then it says lishzar. So I guess the word achutza in this context is just another way of describing ish zar. Like the ish zar is chutza, meaning the ish zar is outside of the purview of the circumference of those who have yibum. He points out, by the way, and this is something that, Steve, we learned together, that Shmuel disagrees with Rav. Shmuel vacillates as to whether Kedushin and Tosin Yevamot is shook. So is this Gemara predicated on Rav against Shmuel? He says, Yesh li yashiv gam l'shita Shmuel es Beis Hillel, mishum she'ein posuk zeh miyutar lahatir tzara, el nitzrach li isur Yevamot l'shuk bi isur la. I don't get it. I mean, if it's just an Easter lav, then Kiddush would be Toksin, or at least the one side in Shmuel. I guess he's saying that Losia, Shmuel vacillates as to how to interpret Losia. Is it Losia B'Havaya, like Rav, or is it Losia means that there's a lot in the marriage, but it's not Mafkia the Tvisas Kiddush? Ubeit Shammai, Miksiv Lachutz. If it would have just said Losia Lachutz, Lachutz would be enough to teach me that she's not allowed to marry someone outside the circle of the Yavam and his brothers. Chutzaks. What does the word chutza mean as opposed to lachutz? Chutza is a reference to the Torah, whose chutza relative to the erva, whose clothing. So it sounds like Beis Shammai are basing their entire sheet on the extra hay, if you follow me. Ubeis Hillel. Eva dechsiv chutza, keman dechsiv lachutz don. I guess he's saying that you end up with the same number of letters. You're not saving any extra letters here. And lachutz and chutza are more or less the same. The Sanya, Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Kol Tevish Etzricha Lamed B'Tchilasi Tila Kosev He B'Sof. So So you could either say it lachutz or you could say chutza. If you say lachutz, then you're using the lamed as a prefix. If, on the other hand, you want to drop the lamed, then in order to indicate ownership, you've got to add a hey at the end. Well, I shouldn't say ownership, maybe a relationship. Hein Tana, the Bay Yishmael could go in Elim. It should have said Le Elim, but rather it says Vayavo Elima. Machanaim, Machanaima, Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim. Ivlasaima, Yerushalmiya, Midbar. Okay, these are various drushas, but basically the rule is that instead of the lamed, you add a hey at the end of the word. Today is Yom Chamishi. Okay, so to Hashem, we'll stop here and we'll pick this up. I mean, we're in the middle of one of those drushas. I met a fellow the other day, learns Daf Yomi. He says he can manage with Daf Yomi until he gets the drushas. And then he can't deal with it because, with drushas, it goes back and forth, back. You have to keep a cheshbon. Okay, then. So wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Bon Voyage, correct? We won't see you for a couple of months, couple of weeks. All right, you'll keep us in touch and tell us when you plan to be back.